Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figure It Outcast for March 2023. I am your host, Adam Koralik, and if you've never been here before, welcome. This is a Patreon-backed podcast, so that means that Patreon backers get access to it much earlier than everybody else. They also get early access to my videos, you get to pick subjects, you get shout-outs, you can even be on the podcast, or you could just listen to it when it comes out, and we appreciate the support. I'm also joined today by Rob. What's up, Rob?
Hello, hello. I feel like we have, like, empty nest syndrome right now.
We really do. So, for long-time listeners, this is going to be kind of a weird episode. Keith is no longer with us.
Rest in peace.
He's alive. He's fine. No, he's fine. He's fine.
Funeral's on Friday.
He's fine. I believe he said this in the previous episode. He's fulfilling, his mom passed away, and he was doing something for his mom, which is to go back to school, and he just wanted to prioritize that. But he claimed he'll probably be back at some point, but it could be a couple of years for all I know. Anyway, Abdullah would normally be with us at this point, but I have not been able to get a hold of him. I'm not really sure why. I hope everything's okay with him. We assume that it is, but yeah, the show must go on, as they say. We will be joined by Joseph later, however, though. And Rob, I guess, welcome back, because you've been kind of almost a cameo at this point, but it's good to have you here.
Well, I started a new job back in September, teaching full-time, so, I just haven't had much in the way of free time, at least kind of getting situated with the job, but it's kind of my New Year's resolution to stop being a seclusionist asshole and actually come up for air every once in a while. So I'm here.
I think people appreciate that. I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll find out. Let us know in the comments if you appreciate that Rob is here. And if you haven't done that already, please like the video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that before. And of course, check out all the social media stuff in the description. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, etc. Thank you so much. Now, let's get on with the actual show here. So if you're unfamiliar with how this works, there's always a list of subjects in the description with time code that goes in there, and you can just click around a different time code if you liked. Today, the first subject is going to be by Chuck Shaw. Now, he is a Patreon backer who is at the tier in which he gets a shout out, and of course gets to pick a subject. He actually didn't really have much of one he was kind of like, yeah, freebie, do what you want. So I don't know if you remember this. Last month we had one by a guy named Lodmott, who is a regular in my Discord. He sent a lot of stuff into the channel, but that was just kind of a one-time thing. But I thought, okay, I asked him if he actually had any ideas for a subject this month, so he would just basically fulfill Chuck's thing here. But speaking of Chuck, I'm going to plug something here just because he's a nice guy. This is actually an announcement. This will be breaking news right here on this podcast. Mo GameCon, the convention that is run by Chuck Shaw, I have been a regular at that, a guest ever since that show started back in 2015. The show is going forward this year. There was some thought that wasn't going to happen. I will be a guest. I am announcing I will be a guest there this year. Rob, you should come out to Mo GameCon.
When is that?
I believe it's in July. It's in St. Louis. I can get you the specific exact dates, but
I might, because I know we're doing. Have we announced the one you're doing up here yet, or?
No, I have not announced that yet
because
I'm not
I might
supposed
come out to Missouri. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been out there.
Yeah, so thank you to Chuck Shaw, because he, of course, is the one who's bringing me out there. The con will be in St. Louis on July 29th, which is quite some time away, but there are some upcoming conventions that I will be at very soon. I will be at Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee, which at the time we're recording this is only a couple weeks away, so the very beginning of April, very end of March 2023. I will also be at a con in London by OLL Gaming, so that'll be really cool, doing a convention in London. That's not the first time I've done a RetroCon in the UK, but that still will be cool to do another one. As well as I will be at Korg's in Columbus, Ohio in May, so we will leave it at that for now. There will be more opportunities. I'm assuming the Sega Pluto will be with me in all these situations, because that typically just happens. So if anybody cares, it'll be there. Now, all right, let's proceed. Thank you very much to Chuck. The subject, which Lodmott selected, he just said the following: how many more modern consoles/console game libraries do you think you'll obtain in your life before you won't want them anymore because of digital-only access or online issues, etc.? Do you want to take point, or do you want me to?
So, yeah, I'll take point on this. So I find it's an interesting question. Honestly, it's one that my opinion has changed over the past 5 years or so. For the longest time, I was actually very much in the same camp as Adam, where I was so intrinsically tied to physical games as my sole way of owning and playing games, specifically as a collector. Now, I don't have a collection nearly as complete as Adam or some of my other friends, but I've got a nice little collection of curated titles that would last me far into my old age if I so chose to give up on future video games and only concentrate on the proverbial backlog. While I don't intend to get rid of my older games, with the digital future always looming in the background as a video gamer, I have in the past few years become more receptive to continuing to actively play modern games in a digital-only future. Obviously, up until that day, I'm still going to be getting physical games. I have a large PS5 collection. I have a lot of games for the Switch and the Xbox. But I do have on all of them titles that are only digitally available because they're games that really intrigue me or that I like, and that don't have physical releases through a limited run or a traditional publisher. So that has kind of eased me into a future where, there is just streaming services or things like Game Pass or Nintendo Switch Online, where you can download and play games like online in a digital-only format. So I don't see myself getting maybe as invested in that digital future still. But if Nintendo's next console, for whatever reason, I don't think this is going to be the case, but if it was digital only, I could see myself picking one up and playing, the new Mario game or the new Zelda that comes out, just because I think my love of those franchises is greater than my love of physical ownership of a media format. So, I could see myself kind of continuing on into the future, but that's not really collecting. That's just playing, and it's definitely not ownership, because as both you and I agree, digital ownership is not ownership.
Correct. Let me take a stab at this, because it's kind of a multi-tiered question. So how many more modern consoles do you think you would obtain in your life? I mean, as long as they're physical, I'm still on board. I'm an extremist. I mean, you guys have seen I've done tons of videos on the obscure. My number one console I want is the FM Towns Marty. I don't really care about the quality of it as long as it's like a physical thing that's interesting for one reason or another. As for like complete sets, I think after the original Xbox, when I actually finish that, whenever that happens, I think that's the last one that I'm ever really going to actively pursue. Maybe something like the Neo Geo CD could creep up on me. I think there was only like 90 titles for that, and I'm already at like 75. But that means that the remaining ones are usually the like multi-$100 ones. So I don't know if that's actually worth my time or financially worth my interest, as it were. So I don't know about that. But I mean, to focus specifically on that moment where something comes out that you go, pass. That's a combination of things where I look at it like I don't want a digital-only console, and there's very few things that could make me change my mind on that. Like if, as you said, if the next Nintendo hardware was digital-only, I don't think, and like you, I don't think Nintendo would do that. So I'm going to focus more on Sony or Microsoft. I could easily see Microsoft, release a thing that's digital-only, and just like, we're not doing a physical edition. We're just done with that. Would I buy that? Probably not. Same with a PS6 that was digital only. I don't have any interest. Like, to me, it's no longer property. It's just I'm basically paying for a rental service at that point, is the way I see it. And not to be hypocritical here, even physical runs into its problems. I'm assuming you recently heard about that story about the Wii U and its NAND problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
So let me go over that real quick with people. So NAND technology is basically upgraded memory. So back in the day when you had cartridges for like your Super Nintendo, N64, or whatever, they used a different type of memory that was basically crafted specifically for the carts because that's just how it was. It was limited in the amount of space it could actually hold, but it was basically permanent data. It essentially is almost impossible to make those things die, like as far as the actual ROM chipset. As time went on, though, they needed to figure out how to cheapen the cost of producing these things in bulk. They also had to make something more universal. That's where NAND technology came in. So the idea was that you would have a smaller chip, it would hold more memory, and you could just kind of make one chip that you could flash anything to. The problem is that is the trade-off there is that NAND technology requires electricity, a flow of that in order for it to stay functional. Now, granted, under ideal circumstances, NAND tech chips should last 20 years without ever being turned on. It takes an incredibly small amount of power to remain in them for them to continue to work, but it is definitely a known thing that if you have anything with NAND technology in it that goes long enough without electricity, it will die. What happens in the Wii U's case specifically, Nintendo used kind of honestly cheap NAND chips. And they basically hard encoded the operating system to those chips, or at least some of the memory in there to get it booted up. So if the chips run out of power, they run on binary code. So I forget which one it is, but a cell that has power is like 1 and a cell with no power is 0 or something like that. And if the ones all die, then the system is no longer capable of booting up. Out of precaution, I actually booted up both of my Wii U's today just to kind of kick that can down the road. But the Nintendo Switch carts use that tech. And if you don't touch a Nintendo Switch, cart for 20 years, theoretically, it too will just fail. Which is a concern because I used to think 20 years, that's a ridiculously long time for you not to play something. But then I look around my own collection, I'm like, there are definitely games in this room that have not been activated in over 20 years. As you get older, you will realize that is more and more of a problem. And so it would not surprise me if at least the physical media we are entering into now is mostly worthless. I mean, we already have that discussion with things like PS5 discs and especially Xbox One discs, where it's just like a small file on the disc and then you have to download the rest of it anyway. It's almost pointless to have a physical edition at that point other than just the novelty of it. So I interpret this question as, is there a hard line where you say no more of that, as opposed to like, is there also a point where it's just so watered down you don't continue to support it? And I think my hard line on that has always been when there truly is no physical edition that goes with it, then I'm not on board. The one condition where I might be like let's say PS6 is digital only. It comes out and I'm like, well, I'm out. I have no interest in that. The one thing that could get me to buy that thing would literally have to be like Shenmue 4. I would maybe do it and be like, I want to experience that game, even though knowing full well that this game will exist very temporarily unless I have like a hacked PS6 or something eventually, And then I would just see it as like, that's my physical edition of Shenmue 4 is a fucking PS6. But you know what I'm saying? Like that would be kind of my mindset at that point. But I also have to approach it from the simple reality that, as you get older, your motivations change. And as you said yourself, I have more video games that I own now than I can ever realistically play for the rest of my existence. I'm not starved for content and new game experiences. Those will always be there, and I'll be totally fine with what I have. Do I want to continue to enjoy new stuff, support new stuff, all that? Of course I do. But you draw a line, and I'm not joking. When I dealt with this Wii U thing, and I looked at those Switch games, and I just thought, it's almost pointless that they're on carts, because if they suffer the same flaw, granted not nearly as badly, it almost made me want to just purge my Switch stuff. I mean, that was just kind of a knee-jerk reaction, not like a real thought, but it was in my mind for a second. So, I don't know. I guess that's what I would say.
You know what? It's so funny with the potential loss of Switch cartridges because of this issue that you described. It's almost like a different iteration of disc rot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the strictest sense of a game just literally dying, sitting on a shelf due to environmental conditions outside of its control, which is hilarious because you look at something like a piece of solid state media like a card and you wouldn't expect that to be the case, but there's another, you know, 4-set play that creates the same problems, just in a different shape.
Yep.
And that is a shame, you know. And you know, it's so funny because you mentioned that you booted up the Wii U when you both of your Wii U's when you heard of it. I actually did the same thing, also with the ulterior motive of perusing the Wii U eShop one last time to see if there's any other games that I might want to download before it goes offline this month. So I guess by the time that people are hearing this podcast on your channel, the Wii U eShop is dead. So rest in peace.
You know what's it's funny because it's the timing of this news story about the Nantech is kind of an interesting that would come out about the exact same time the Wii U eShop is going down. And I can't help but think that the guy who figured that out, because this actually started from a Reddit thread. There was a guy who found that out and posted about it. I will almost guarantee you he fired it up for exactly that reason. He was like, let me go check oh, wow, my Wii U doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? And then he like figured it out. I can almost guarantee that's what happened because those, people weren't turning them on for, I don't know how many years, maybe 10 years at that point. So, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the Wii U is nearly 11 years old. I did that big video last year on the 10th anniversary. One of my Wii U's is a modded Wii U. That one's been turned on very recently because I actually do use it. But the other one, I don't think I had turned on since like 2016. So I was actually kind of concerned about it. And then, it booted up just fine. I had no problems. But, it makes you think, like, as much as we sit here and go, like, this is sad that this is happening, etc., if the problem is that you just didn't turn it on for a decade, how much do you really value it? And that's kind of a different discussion that I guess we could get into with collecting at another point. But I'm more of a preservationist, so I don't like the idea that the tech and all that stuff just dies on its own from no fault of your own. But at the same time, as I sit here, lately I've been going through, I finally got permission to go through my late mother's home, the one that had the fire. And so I'm sitting there like looking through stuff and thinking like, kid me preserved this. I don't even remember it. Do I keep it? Do I toss it? Does this matter to me? And I don't know. It's just like a different.
I saw you found Game Gear boxes.
I did, and so I was posting in my Discord for everybody who's unsure what I'm saying. I went through my Discord and posted some images of stuff that I found. Because when I was a kid, I was very much a pack rat. I kind of put everything away and in boxes and plastic tubs and all this sort of stuff. And I kind of hid them in my room in just like these little I don't even know how to describe it. Like crawl spaces. Because the room I had was at the top of the house and it used to be an attic. So when they reshaped it to be a bedroom, it just kind of had these little, to kind of use the space, but not make it feel like an attic. They built straight walls, which led to a natural, kind of arc behind it. Then you could make cubby spaces or crawl spaces behind them. And so I would use them as storage. And I put tons of stuff in there when I was like 14, 15, 16. In fact, you remember that episode of Playload where I found Rule of Rose and Kuon back there? Yeah. Because when I was a kid, I had bought them, or at least I guess at that point I was either high school or college. I had bought them and then put them in there and just forgot about them. And so at this point, I got more permission to go in there because now I can actually touch, not that this really matters for insurance purposes, but like I now have permission to like touch stuff that had smoke damage, you know what I mean? And just kind of decide if you care about it or not. And so I started that process, and in that I found like a bag or a box or something like that full of miscellaneous, and I guess I had put in boxed Game Gears. Like I had Sonic 2, Sonic Chaos, Aladdin. If you notice, the Aladdin copy is actually the Majesco reprint. It even says Majesco on the box.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's really cool. They were in great shape, as you can see, which was nice, all things considered. But I forgot I even had that. And so you just have to ask yourself at a certain point, like, when do you stop caring, or did that already happen? You don't realize it, or do you still care? My answer is, of course, I still care, but it's just kind of a fascinating, I don't know, process to go through.
Yeah.
But
Well, the what you mentioned too is that you and I both come from the point of view of preservation
Yeah.
as well. Not just, being personal preservation of your own collection and your own library of games and consoles and keeping them in a good shape and in working order, but or archiving discs like you do with every disc-based game that you have, but also in favor of like general preservation of video game ROMs or prototypes, things like that. People like the Video Game History Foundation or the museum in Frisco, Texas, or the Strong Museum, being able to preserve things as part of a game's development or its history. And I always say that emulation is the future when it comes to games, and being able to preserve them for a future generation for enjoyment and play. But the consoles that they're played on are just as important, because playing a game like Nintendo Land, for instance, on the Wii U, is the way that game is meant to be played. It's never going to be playable anywhere else because of how intrinsically it's tied to the hardware in which it was developed for. So having a hardware issue like this one that we've discussed is so damning for preservationists like us, because yes, we can rip this ROM, we could have this game will be playable, but not really, because it's so tied to the hardware. And as these things start to die on store shelves or in basements, attics, in a collector's collection that they just don't touch for 20 years, it's sad that in 20 years, I think there's going to be a lot less Wii U's than there are now, and that's saying something.
yeah, I mean, two thoughts on that. One, just quickly, because you mentioned the National Video Game Museum. So I was in there and I found a Christmas ad from, I want to say, December 2000, from Toys R Us. And I think I showed photos of it in the Discord. And I actually...
Yeah, all the prices and stuff, yeah.
Right. I actually sent photos of that to Kelsey Lewin. Shout out to her, because she runs the Video Game History Foundation. And I was just like, do you want this? And she's like, yes, actually. We want scans of that, so that'd be great. So, I agree. Young me thought to put that aside so that it didn't die. Why? I don't know. I still function that way. Obviously, you want to preserve it. It's just a matter of finding the right people in which to get that done. But there's a lot of people out there like that, fortunately, that want to preserve history. So, and obviously, we both respect that. And what was the other thing you said towards the end that I was going to respond to?
Just the systems that they're
yes, I know what I was gonna say, because you said there's gonna be a lot less Wii U's, and having gone to Japan recently, noticing that they are just the Japanese hard-offs are littered with Wii U's. It's actually a very surreal sight. There's just tons of them. They're usually like $10-20. I promise you, those are just getting purged, man. They're not getting turned on. They're not in good shape. Wii U's will be very expensive and very hard to find in only a few years. Mark my words on that.
Yeah, I mean, and I hope that in the future, because granted, this is kind of doom and gloom, but, granted that there is, a hope that us being really in what I would refer to as the golden age of video game preservation, where there are organizations and museums and people working hard to archive as much of this stuff and keep this stuff running. In the future, who knows if there's going to be a workaround where, similar to replacing caps on a Game Gear or an Xbox, or replacing a broken component of a video game console, in the future, who knows, there could be that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is a possibility, but it's still a shame regardless, because most people are going to be like, oh, it doesn't work anymore, chuck it out.
So you're referring to the Wii U specifically? I actually watched a guy, he talked about that exact scenario. He was like, the problem is it goes completely dead. It just blacks out because it essentially has no operating software anymore. And he's like, the only way to really do that is you have to take it apart, get to the chip, you have to reflash it. It's way beyond like what any normal person's gonna be able to do. I mean, it'd be one thing if you found a way to be like, oh, we've figured out a way to put a USB thumbstick in the port there in the front, and then it just boots from that. But it's not Windows.
Yeah, it circumvents.
It's not Windows. The Wii U doesn't even attempt to look for an OS there. If it doesn't see it on the NAND, it just stops. So to reflash it is like a serious endeavor. Now, this is bypassable. All you got to do is turn your Wii U on every, couple of years. It's not like a huge request, but you got to do it. I mean, I turned them on and just let them run for a little bit, and then just kind of recharges it, and then it's good to go. But that's the point. Eventually you'll screw up, or eventually, somebody will, and you'll die or whatever. And like the Wii U's will die, because that's an unfortunate thing about it. It is really weird if you think about it, Rob, because like we grew up in the era where, and this probably shaped us. We grew up in an era of everything was kind of permanent as far as like cartridges and stuff. CDs were in their infancy, Sega CD, obviously PlayStation, whatever. But those cartridge-based consoles with the tech they had was a limitation. They didn't have the ability to have big storage. They had to do it one very specific way because that was all that was available to them. But essentially it forced them to make these tanks. Like a Genesis never dies. The cartridges never die. Like they will outlive all of us easily. And it's like as the technology gets more and more complicated, there's more and more things in it that can go wrong. And obviously this still happens. Like my favorite console, something like the Dreamcast, it for the most part is good, but its disk drive fails. So that's where you replace it with the mode and all, ODEs and stuff like that. But like those true OG systems that just you don't have to do anything to and they just survive forever, that era is totally over. But that era only worked because they were like early cars. There were cars that were just very minimalist on parts, and they just were built out of like cast iron, and they just lasted forever because they were like
now they're computers.
Exactly.
And computers die.
As the technology gets more innovative and cheaper, that always leads to more complication and more things that can go wrong. It's just kind of there's something to be said there about the simplicity of it, even if it's more limiting. So just to kind of put a bow on this, I think you need to make it your solemn duty that every year on the anniversary of the Wii U, you just gotta post on Twitter or something, post on Discord, be like, hey, power on your Wii U today. Play some Nintendo Land. Because it's not coming anywhere else. And breathe some life into your beloved system. It's not a terrible idea, though I'm likely going to forget, which is the entire problem. But
you're just going to forget.
Which admittedly is the problem. I'm not I have no delusions about that. Okay, well, we'll move on from this. So thank you to Chuck Shaw, technically, because this was officially his subject. And although Lodmot, you provided it, so thank you for that. And this would have involved Abdullah, but again, we couldn't get a hold of him, so I hope he's all right. But we're going to do a round of shout-outs now. So the following people are all Patreon backers, and they are at the tier in which they get a shout-out. So to Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Tim Inman, Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Thank you so much for the support. And we're back. Now we have Joseph with us. Welcome back, dude.
Thank you, Adam. I'm glad to be back here. And nice to see you here again, Rob.
Always a pleasure, Joseph.
It was such a pleasure. You should have been here the last few months, Rob.
I was here last month. I was here.
He was here last month.
Few months. All right. I'm just being difficult with him. Okay, but yes, it is good. We can all get going here. So, Joseph, as obviously you are a backer of the podcast and you get to pick a subject, you did. Would you like to introduce your subject, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, you can go ahead and do it. I don't actually have it in front of me right now, which is not that big of a deal, but maybe
it'll come back
to
you.
Yeah. So fair enough. So basically, what you wanted to do was talk about backlog games. Like, what are the games that we want to play the most that we haven't? Why haven't we played them, etc. Right?
Yes, with the caveat of obviously not having enough time or other games just taking over our lives or whatever, not being included. Because if we do that one, the topic will be really short. Because my answer will be I'm a Stellaris addict. Adam's answer will be he's never home, and I'm not sure what Rob's answer would be. But
I hate
Rob's he's out beating up little kids and stuff. Rob things. That's what he does.
Right.
So if we take away those obvious things that are all priorities to us, again, me traveling, you working, Rob beating up children, what are our reasons for not playing games? So the franchise, I guess I'll start this off here. So I typically like to play games in marathon, kind of the way I like to watch like a movie or a TV show or something like that. And so sometimes it's hard for me to commit to a game that I've always wanted to play just because it means I'm going to have to follow it up with a bunch of the sequels. And I find that the best motivation I have for that is actually when my girlfriend's in town, which she actually is right now, by the way. So it's awesome because we've been playing Metal Gear Solid.
Hi, Mrs. Claus.
She can't hear it. She can't hear you at the moment, but I'm sure she'll understand that you say hello. Anyway, so like one of the things that we have a tendency to do when we're together is that we'll like pick a game franchise and we'll just kind of run with it. Like last time we did the Silent Hill stuff and Resident Evil stuff, which was nice up to a certain point. We only kind of did mainline things, but a lot of those games, especially like the later Silent Hills, I hadn't really ever played. And this time we're doing Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid PS1 game, as well as the GameCube remake, I've played a million times. But all the sequels, I played like Metal Gear Solid 2 once when it came out. Barely remember it at all. Never played any of the ones after that. So now, like, as our powers combined, that's when we can do that. I think we started this tradition, like, 9 years ago at this point. We started playing like the Zelda games. We beat the two NES ones, and we're long overdue to continue that. There's actually, it's weird, there are people that remember that. So like, I don't remember if it was my Discord or where it was, but somebody's like, oh, Mrs. Claus is in town, are you guys going to finally play Link to the Past? I'm like, wow, people have good memories and stuff that really shouldn't matter to them. But that actually is kind of, at this point, kind of my biggest motivation is like, there's individual games I'll play, of course, for my own entertainment. But when it comes to these like bigger franchises that I've never really experienced and they're clearly placed in a backlog of some specialty, at this point, it's mostly because I'm just enjoying the idea of us playing them together. We did this for some Far Cry stuff, of course. Then there's Assassin's Creed, which, to be fair, that's all, her franchise. She plays that, and I just sit there and watch as she's like yelling at the game while also loving it to death. And it's like a fun thing to do together. That's really, I guess, my answer to that.
Okay, I mean, that definitely makes a lot of sense, especially if you have the whole thought process where, okay, I'm going to play a game, now I need to play the next 6. When's a good time to do that? Oh, I mean, just basically, especially since your girlfriend being in town is probably one of the only times when you're actually home long enough to actually do a marathon.
Precisely, yes.
So, well, obviously, I have a couple of games in particular that are in my backlog that I've been wanting to play, like, a lot and just haven't gotten around to. Because, obviously, because that's why I brought up the topic. But off the top of my head, for what those are, the Fatal Frame games are one of the ones that I've been meaning to play for a while. And I actually made sure to actually buy the one I didn't have when Nintendo announced that we were finally getting Fatal Frame 4 over here. But I still...
4 or 5?
We got 5 on the Wii U and Switch first.
Digital. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah, then the Wii
4 never came to the US at all until August.
Okay, just clarify. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So at that point, it's like, okay, well, I do have like all the ones that have been released now, but as people would know from when I mentioned like how I had to take a long time to get through the RE2 remake just because of the whole fact that like I'm only in the mood to play horror games at a certain amount of time, certain times, or like when I'm in the mood for it. If I'm not in the mood for it, I don't want to play them. That's been the main reason why I haven't actually gotten around to playing the Fatal Frame games. Of course, there are other games as well. Like I've been wanting to also play Rune Factory 4 for a while. Ever since I played Stardew Valley, it's like, okay, well, that was definitely cool. I spent a lot of time on that. What other games are there? Oh, okay, Rune Factory 4. Got that. Never got around to actually playing it. Then I just recently played Harvest Zone. I'm like, I'm definitely in the mood to play this to play another farming sim that also has like a JRPG plot and monsters to fight. I mean, RPG plot. Shouldn't say JRPG anymore. Anyway, but I still haven't gotten around to that, which I do have for Switch. It's on my shelf. I should probably get around to doing that sometime soon. And then there are other RPGs that I've also just haven't gotten around to playing yet, like the Trails in the Sky games in particular. I have played the first one way back when the first one was the only one we had. And then, like, years later, we got the second one. It's like, well, okay, but these two are... But the first one and the second one are basically two parts of the same story. The first game literally ends on a cliffhanger. I should replay the first game. And I just never got around to committing to playing 60 hours of a game that I've already played before. That's basically Act 1 of the entire story. So, that one has just been similar to, I guess, what you're saying. It's like, okay, if I'm going to play this, I need to play 2 immediately after. I don't necessarily want to commit to playing 120 hours of game right now. I say, as if I won't just do that for like a game like Stellaris or something, where I'll end up playing a 4X game several times in a row and end up spending the same amount of time, but that's kind of different.
So yeah, that's the exact problem I'm talking about. Like, I'd like to do these marathons, but I kind of need my partner in crime over there to help get me through it. Actually, and sorry, I didn't quite answer this part. Like, of all the franchises that I haven't played that I really want to, like, we're currently doing Metal Gear Solid. I think the one I would really like us to do at some point, babe, if you're listening, I want to do Yakuza all the way through.
Oh, God.
She just said, oh, I want to do that.
Oh, God.
I guess you're never getting to Link to the Past now.
Yeah, Link to the Past is going to wait until we actually have a time machine. Anyway, Rob, what about you?
So I really try and make it a point to give myself the time in a given week, even if I'm working, 5 days a week, and, kind of have long hours, to just try and carve out a little me time and play games. And so I play games, usually 4 or 5 times a week at least. I get home, I unpack all my stuff, do a little household chores, and then I'll play games for about an hour or so until the wife gets home. So finding the time to play games is really not the issue. And I also travel enough, and unlike Adam, I always bring a video game with me. I'll bring my Switch, or I'll bring my DS or my Vita. The last trip where Adam was asleep for most of our time in Alaska, I brought my DS Lite with me. Just like, hey, you haven't brought this out in a while, so, I'll play it on the plane or whatever. I always try and find the time to do that, because I really do enjoy it, and it just mellows me out for the most part. My problem is, during that time that I do make to play games, a lot of times I default and play what I refer to as, like, comfort food games. Like, I'll go into my room and be like, well, you know what, I really haven't played, the stuff that I'm guilty for is, like, a lot of Sony's more recent first-party games. Like, I never played Spider-Man. I haven't played the 2 God of War games, the 2 Horizon Zero Dawn games. I made it a point to play The Last of Us, but, like, I'm really slacking on a lot of Sony's more recent excellent first-party output. And, I'll go in, I'm like, yeah, today, I'm going to play, the Shadow of the Colossus remake or something like that. And then I sit down, and I'm like, you know what? I could really go for, Sonic 2.
I thought you were going to say Franklin.
Yeah.
I could really go for Franklin right now. Honestly, the one that I'm so guilty of, that, which is funny because, it's all about finding time to play games. Like, every couple years, I'll just, like, play the entire Mass Effect trilogy. Most recently when the Legendary Edition came out, like, I sank like 120 hours into those games because I fucking love them so much, and however many times I've played them, I still find new things to love about them. And so it's really difficult. Like every summer, like I'll just get in the mood to play Super Mario Sunshine for the millionth time, or in the fall, like I'll replay Night in the Woods, which is like an ultimate comfort food game for me, for the 5th time. So it's difficult. Like games are kind of an escape for me, and it's something that I always really enjoy doing, and I think it's important to carve out that time. So when I do carve out that time, I want games that are comfortable, that I love, that bring me back to, a memorable time or evoke a feeling. Like you, Joseph, mentioned that it's like, yeah, you really want to play survival horror games in the Halloween season, and just kind of really lean into that. And, so it's really hard for me to just want to play something else new, which I know is crazy, because these new games are amazing, and every time I do play a new game, that just blows me away. I'm like, wow, yeah, there's so much more of this out there that I need to do. It's difficult to dedicate that when there's just stuff that I love replaying over and over and over again.
Oh yeah, like I said, I'm a 4X game addict, specifically Stellaris and Civ 6. I will play those games multiple times in a row, and those games, I'm not going to say they take forever, because obviously each game you play, and that takes less time than a full RPG does. But if I boot up a game of Stellaris, and then after that one's done, I boot up another one, and then boot up another one, I end up not playing anything else for a while, which means come next week, I'm not going to be playing anything else besides Stellaris, because guess what's coming out with a new DLC in a week?
Yeah. I mean, case in point, Adam, when was the last time that you played through Shenmue 1 and 2?
2019. I was actually going to piggyback on what you said, though. I actually agree with you about the junk food game logic, which was... So occasionally I actually do have downtime where I'm like, I am going to play a game. This is going to happen. And I'll try to sit there and do it. And I just I don't know. I just don't have that push to try and get over the hump of playing something that I'm totally unfamiliar with. So I end up just reverting back to a lot of my, my familiars. Not actually Shenmue, because Shenmue is a commitment. But, I recently replayed the entirety of the GoldenEye re-release, all the way through. I think we talked about that before.
We did.
Actually, it's kind of your fault. I did a big Ninja Turtles marathon. And this was kind of an interesting situation. So, the Cowabunga collection?
Yeah.
Oh, right. That came out.
Right. So I got that. And I already, for the most part, I actually have those games originally. But that one was cool because it also had arcade versions. So I was playing that through, and I was like, "This is fun. This is unfamiliar, but it's cool to actually have it consoleized, etc." And just to be able to play all that stuff again. But then after it was over, and I beat every one of the games on there for the most part, I was like, "I want more Turtles." Well, you have the option, that reshelled thing. That kind of pushed me into continuing, and I actually played through reshelled all the way. And even when I finished that, I was still kind of in the mood for some more Turtles, and it actually got me to play that Nickelodeon's All-Stars Brawl. Do you guys play that?
Yeah, the Smash Club.
I do.
Right?
I do
yes,
own that. I've played it a little bit, but haven't.
It's actually
much.
not bad. It's not bad. I ended up beating it, at least the mainline part of it, with just every individual character, just to kind of unlock stuff. It's Smash Brothers. That's
oh
all
yeah,
it
no, I
is,
know. It's literally just Smash Brothers, but Nick. But...
Yeah, exactly. And I actually had a good time with it. So it's one of those situations where I had to get into the right comfort zone. Once I did, it forced me to try some new stuff and get all the way through it. So that's a scenario that can happen. But a lot of the times, it is possible you'll just be like, oh, all right, I'm going to play something. I got some time. And then I just revert back to Mario Kart 64 because I know it backwards and forwards and I don't have to think. Hence, I agree with you, Rob, about the junk food logic.
Yeah. So
I mean, the fact that two complicated 4X games are my main junk food games is a bit ridiculous, but yeah, it's basically the same deal there.
So to that point, so everybody, I guess, dish. What's the most recent kind of big game that you have played through and actually completed?
I guess that would be mine would be TMNT reshelled then.
What about you, Joseph?
Harvestella.
Harvestella. I'm in the middle of Metroid Prime Remastered. I picked up the physical copy.
Well, you said finished. I mean, if we're counting what we're in progress with it, that's the same one.
I just picked up the physical copy like last week, so like I'm still in the middle, and I'm like, I'm gonna complete this game because I had that game back in the day, but didn't finish it for whatever reason. I probably got stuck on a part and couldn't figure out what to do. So like I'm completing this game. I'm in deep on this right now, and I'm fucking loving every second of it. This game,
I bought it 4 times, and hopefully this time will be the time I actually finish it.
Oh, it's a fucking masterpiece. It's so good. It's so good.
Granted, the new control scheme makes things a lot better. Like the first time when I bought the first one, I bought it at a flea market for like $4, like 15 years ago. Yeah. So it was like, okay, yeah, cool, this is cool. And that was like before I really played any of the Metroids at all. So it was just like, okay, this is neat, I'll get to it eventually, and then never did. Yeah. Then when I actually wanted to play it, I bought the Wii U re-release that was on the eShop. Mm-hmm. Played it for a bit, never actually got through it. And then later on, eventually, I got Trilogy physically. I was like, okay, cool, let's actually play this again. I actually got pretty far, but then I stopped. So, but this time the controls feel a lot better than the Wiimote pointer. Everywhere.
Actually, I did not mind the pointer controls in the Wii version.
They're functional and they work good. They work great. It's just like as Adam would say, just like using it, and especially for an extended period of time. It's just like, okay, yeah, I'm good. I play like an hour or so of this. I'm done for now.
Actually, you know what? Like another comfort food game that I could definitely point to, one that I keep playing over and over again, and specifically, it's the version on the Wii, is Resident Evil 4. On the Wii version, for some reason, like I bought and played through the GameCube version back when it came out, but when that Wii version came out and they had it kind of as the Ultimate Edition with all of like the PS2 content in there, and they added the motion controls. I don't know, man. There's something about those motion controls that really completes that game for me. It adds kind of like a visceral, like hands-on aspect to it. That
from what I heard, it makes it easier too.
It does. But I don't know, there's something about it, and I'm normally like in Adam's camp that I really don't care for the motion controls. For some reason, that it really, really fits well with that game, to the point where, when the HD version was re-released on the Switch, I was really hoping that they would add those pointer controls back in using the gyro aiming, and they did not.
Yeah, because it came from probably the PS3 or the PS4
yeah,
version.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which it's very weird considering the PS3 had the Move controller, and Resident Evil 5, I believe, had those controls with those.
I believe so, yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Oh well.
That by then, I think that the whole motion thing was kind of dead, and it was now seen as an albatross more than a positive.
Very true, very true.
So, Joseph, thank you very much for that subject. And now we will move on to the last subject tonight, which comes from Spencer Puryear. Spencer Puryear is a backer at the level in which he gets to pick a subject. Actually, you guys might see him on here at some point. He is actually now backing the podcast to be on the podcast, but has so far elected not to actually do it, which is just generous of him. But he did have a subject in mind. He wanted us to talk about movie genre fatigue. Basically, what kind of movies are we tired of? Things like, are we tired of Marvel? Are we tired of Disney remakes? Are we tired of zombie movies? What comes to your mind?
Well, as someone who doesn't actually watch a lot of movies, now that I think about it, I definitely did have MCU fatigue for sure. I mean, not in the sense of why are they still making so many Marvel movies? I mean, besides the fact that answer is obvious, the answer is money. But it was just like once the streaming stuff started, I watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision. Then Loki came out, and I just looked, I'll get to this eventually. And then What If and Miss Marvel and all the other stuff came out. I was like, I'll get to this eventually, but like since Endgame, I think other than Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, the only MCU thing I actually seen was the last Spider-Man movie.
Marvel is the quintessential example, and I think that all of us went through exactly what you just described, where after Endgame was over, we were all hyped. We were all like, okay, that was awesome. Let's see what happens next. And with the exception of Spider-Man, Phase 4 has been an unmitigated disaster. And I tried to stay with it. You know, I think I saw... What was the first one up? It was Black Widow, which came out just as the pandemic was kind of wrapping up. We were allowed to see stuff again in theaters. We're going to try seeing that. Really, really bad movie. Just awful. I saw Shang-Chi. I wanted to see it. I think I saw it in theaters and just thought, this is not a movie I would have seen unless it was a Marvel movie. And it really was very mediocre. I started watching those shows. I liked WandaVision a lot, but the gimmick of we're going to space out a movie into 6 episodes started to wear really thin with, you know, Captain America and the Winter Soldier, or Captain and the Falcon, whatever that show. What is the show?
Yeah.
Falcon
and the Winter Soldier.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier, sorry. That show was just a lot of nothing.
Boring.
And then, of course, there's that great rant at the end that even first time I saw it, I was like, he's like yelling at a senator for like 10 minutes. It's like, we got it the first time you said it. I believe we've actually talked. I mean, there was a time, guys, if you listen to this podcast, I used to do like little mini reviews of every big Marvel thing that came out. Do you notice we stopped doing that? Because we just kind of lost interest. I think that the last one I really watched all the way through was whatever came right before Moon Knight. What came out right before Moon Knight? Does anybody remember?
I don't remember.
Like
I said, I haven't watched any of it.
I did watch What If. Well, there was also movies. Whatever. Point is, I was watching all this stuff, and I was gradually losing more and more interest. And I was actually just on, I don't know if you guys know them, Midnight's Edge is a YouTube channel that does movie reviews, talks about movie industry stuff, etc. I was just on their I was on one of their live streams the other day, and we had this basically the same discussion about this, but specifically focused on Marvel. And you know, it was kind of presenting the point that the box office returns have been really bad. The amount of content produced from this has been astronomical. They actually had this flowchart of the amount of hours of MCU. Phase 1 was like 7 hours or something. Phase 2 was like 7.5 hours. Phase 3 was like 9 hours. Phase 4 so far has been like 49 hours because it's mostly Disney Plus crap that's just really padded out. And so it's like, no wonder you're getting fatigued. There's more content in this one phase than the other 3 combined, and it's all much less engaging. And, you know, to add to that point, I told this story on that stream. I don't know if you guys saw The Eternals, but it is essentially it's an unwatchable film. It is terrible. I watched it on a flight. I don't remember going where, but I watched it on a flight, and I was just like, I literally have nothing better to do. That's the only reason I'm trying to sit through this. And I remember last year, my girlfriend and I, we were flying back to Europe. So we were catching a flight, I think actually from Rob, we were catching it from Newark out to Portugal. And there was this woman sitting next to me, and she's clearly getting ready to try and sleep. You know, she pulls up the blanket. She's got like the pillow situation happening, that neck pillow. You know, you can see she's getting her, like, everything is preparing for shutdown time. And then at the exact same time, she takes out her phone and puts on the Eternals. And I just kind of looked at her, kind of befuddled, because those two things didn't add up. If you're going to go to sleep, why are you putting on a movie? She clearly noticed me doing that, because she looks at me and just goes, when I want to sleep, I watch the Eternals. And I was like, that tells you everything you need to know. All the excitement, all the engagement is totally gone. Again, except for Spider-Man, which truly was an amazing movie. And it's like the only part of Phase 4 that hasn't been awful. Where Moon Knight, I just never got around to. But the one that truly just made me stop caring was She-Hulk. When I have a thing, like I said, I like marathons. So with the TV shows or the Disney Plus shows, whatever you want to call them, I wasn't even trying to watch them until they were completed. I don't like doing cliffhangers. I don't like waiting a week. I'm just like, I'll watch this all in mass. Now, we live in this era, so if anything like that comes out, you're going to see memes and random screenshots and YouTubers saying, Hulk is in this? You know, just random. You can't avoid certain elements of spoilers. And so I started seeing all these, like, random screenshots and memes of She-Hulk twerking, and I was like, this looks really stupid. And, like, every single review from people I actually trust the opinions of was like, this is one of the worst things ever produced. And I just kind of stopped caring. You know, like, every single element that I've seen has been very lackluster. There were a couple where I thought, maybe I'll get into it. So I went to go see Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Horrible movie. Just horrible. The fact that Sam Raimi, they brought him out, you know, to be like, you're going to do a new Marvel movie. We just came off the back of Spider-Man, which we brought back the Sam Raimi era Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire. It seemed, and we're going to do dimension hopping. First Doctor Strange is pretty cool. The character is great. It seemed so obvious this is going to be primed for awesome. And it was just, Doctor Strange isn't even the lead in his own movie. It was just such a stupid movie. And it just hasn't gotten any better. And apparently the new Ant-Man movie, everybody says, is a pile of crap. Like, I don't even care anymore. So when I'm on that show on Midnight's Edge, I propose the question, what does it take to repair this, assuming they intend to? Do you just have executives say publicly, Phase 4 was a mistake, we're starting over, Endgame was the last thing that was canon? Or do you actually do like a Days of Future Past type of thing to just make all of Phase 4 non-existent? You know, like, I realize we're very much splitting into just specifically Marvel. I would apply this logic to a lot of things, but before we go to other franchises, I'll say start there. Anybody?
I mean, I think Marvel knows the declining quality is a thing with Phase 4, and realistically, I don't think they want to get into retconning and other universes, because that's the folly that the X-Men universe and the DCEU has fallen into. Like, that's not canon, but this is, and this, that's a different universe, that's a different, you know, I think they're just going to try and move past it and try and make more compelling product in a Phase 5 and try and recoup some of that. Because generally, the MCU, you know, Agent Carter or Agent S.H.I.E.L.D. notwithstanding, has been pretty good with, you know, the stuff that we produce is under this grand unified umbrella, and it's all canon. And for the good or bad, you know, there's an Inhumans here, or
Phase 4.
You know, or Phase 4 there, but, you know, we'll move past it, and we'll get to something more compelling and recapture people's interest.
As someone who actually enjoyed the 3 pieces of Phase 4 I actually watched, and just for whatever reason just fell off it, I kind of agree with Rob. What they should do to fix it is basically just go and actually make good stuff, and maybe not make as much of it, so that they could concentrate on the stuff they're actually making, instead of being like, okay, well, we're making this, but it also has to set up the next 6 things.
Yeah.
Or,
I mean, to be fair, Disney kind of did this already with Star Wars, to maybe not a great extent, but, you know, they were greenlighting films left and right. At a given time, you know, they were like, oh, Rian Johnson's going to have his own trilogy, Patty Jenkins is going to do Rogue One, and this and that, and we've got the sequel trilogy, and Han Solo and Rogue One. And then as the quality dipped and people started saying, like, I don't know about this, they pulled back, and they're like, okay, let's refocus more on the Disney Plus shows. We'll do some excellent stuff with Mandalorian, with Andor. The animated things, we'll bring those back in and try and rebuild the image of Star Wars in fans' eyes. You know, not always successful, but for the most part successful on Disney Plus. And then we could reapproach films and try and regrow that confidence.
So Marvel should do the opposite and stop the Disney Plus stuff and go back to just making the movies, because when they were just doing the movies, they were doing good.
Yeah, I would agree.
Now, that said, Endgame was always going to be a drop-off point for a lot of people, just because of what Endgame was, as well. Like, after Endgame, it's like, well, okay, but more Marvel stuff is happening, but the thing's over. It's like it reached what its end was, and now it continues for like an entire 2 phases, or however long it actually goes on for.
So I understand that logic, at least within MCU, because that's you were basically conditioned for a decade that this is where it was leading. That was the problem that Phase 4 made, was that it didn't really establish that this was going anywhere. Like, you're not even trying to set anything up anymore. I mean, it was okay when you had like you were a couple movies in and we didn't really know, but now it's like everything's kind of going in a bunch of random directions, and presumably it has to do with alternate dimensions, but there's not even a consistent theme. And if we look at behind the camera, it's largely because Kevin Feige was very uninvolved in Phase 4. And there's a whole lot that goes with that. But as I think you said before, it's really just the sheer amount of content, and it just gets too overwhelming. And as I said earlier, it has to do with, again, there is a flowchart that actually explains how many hours of content still exists, and it's like all of Phase 1, 2, and 3 combined are not as long as Phase 4. And Phase 4 is still going.
Yeah. I think
and it's not going anywhere. That's the irony.
I mean, what Disney, I think, was hoping to do was have Phase 4 be really a new Phase 1. You have this perfect self-contained story, the Infinity Saga. That's done. You've killed off, your 2 main leads, really, in that, in Captain America and Iron Man. So Phase 4 needs to be about reestablishing the universe under new heroes. So, and they did do that, to a certain extent. She-Hulk and, the Scarlet Witch has got, like, somebody new. Miss Marvel is somebody new. America Chavez with Doctor Strange. About kind of passing the torch to that next generation of heroes. The issue is that, one, the heroes aren't compelling. They're not big names. Who the fuck knows what Moon Knight is? I mean, yes, comic book fans know who he is, but the general public doesn't know who the fuck he is and doesn't really care. The only, and the other half is that there, as Adam just said, there's far too much of it. There's, it's 5 times the length of the first phase. So instead of focusing on creating your next generation, quote unquote, of Avengers for the next saga, whether that's, Galactus or in multiverse or whatever, they're spread far too thin. It's as wide as an ocean, but as deep as a puddle. That's the problem with the Marvel right now. And that ocean is too saturated with characters that people don't give a shit about. Shang-Chi and the Eternals and, all of this. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree there. And, also, the third Spider-Man movie in the MCU was good. But it also basically went okay, this is over. Spider-Man's origin story is finally done, and now he can be a hero on his own, as opposed to having an MCU mentor figure in each movie. But though, that was apparently Sony's doing, not Marvel's.
But let's be honest. Why was Spider-Man 3 good? It was good because of nostalgia for previous franchises. It didn't bring anything new. It just reset the status quo. Okay, now Spider-Man's a poor kid, and nobody knows who he is. That's it.
Yeah, there was a lot of overloading your brain with the familiar to release a flood of endorphins that you got out of that movie, because it basically said, hey, remember Andrew Garfield? Hey, remember Tobey Maguire? But to be fair to them, they used it in the best way you possibly could. And it was kind of nice that they gave those 2 particular series some sort of conclusion rather than just kind of having them end the way they ended originally. I liked it. I thought it was very well done. But you're not wrong, Rob, that it's very heavily dependent on the fact that you remember those things and like them, and it overloads you with that. I don't know how you would actually watch that movie and fully get into it if you hadn't seen the other ones, or at least were aware of them.
Yeah.
but at least I don't think you'd get nearly as much out of it. But let's stop talking about Marvel, because this wasn't specifically about Marvel.
So I actually want to piggyback off of kind of like that idea of nostalgia and see what fatigue that I have. Now, Marvel is the clear example of this, but my problem with especially movies is the over-reliance recently on established franchises and IPs. I feel like every movie now, and there's not a lot of movies. That's a big problem for me. I fucking love going to the movie theater, experiencing a film in a big dark room with a big screen and a bowl of stale popcorn with other people. That is a pure fucking experience for me. And I've gone to the movies 3 times in the past year, and that's not by choice. It's by the fact that there is so little original content at the movies now being produced. There's no, and this is a problem with the video game industry too, there's no AA movies anymore. It's either cool little indie films or spotlights by a given director, your Tarantino movie or your Scorsese movie, and then there is AAA movies. There is no middle ground. I think one of the reasons we have such a fondness for the 90s and the 80s is that a lot of our favorite movies, like little comedies or funny little action films or dramas, were new IPs, and they were in that sweet spot, that AA movie, and that's where my fatigue is. I'm trying to think of what movies in the past 2 years that I've really, really enjoyed, and the ones that I've really enjoyed are the rare spots where it's a new IP or something that tickles an itch that I didn't know I had. I love, my favorite director right now is Edgar Wright. You know him from the Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Deads, or Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. He released a movie 2 years ago called Last Night in Soho. I fucking loved that movie. Because it was kind of a new thing, and it was like using cool actors and a great soundtrack. RRR, that movie, it's a foreign film, is fucking brilliant. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That should win Best Picture at the Academy Awards this year. I don't know if it will. It's fucking great. It's so good. I remember watching this being like, why aren't there more movies like this? Creativity is so dead. And it's so reliant on look, we're bringing back Ninja Turtles. Look, there's more Marvel. Batman, new Batman. You like Batman, don't you? Yeah, well, you better, because that's all you're fucking getting. Mm-hmm. I love, Marvel movies. I loved the MCU. But I loved it so much more when it was a smaller percentage of my movie watching diet. Now,
or movie watching potential.
Yeah, or movie watching potential. I can go on my local theater, up in the sticks where I live. There's a small little 2-screen movie theater that I haven't been to because the movies that are showing are either for little kids or are superhero movies. Right now, if I wanted to go there, it's Quantumania and I don't know, something else for little kids. I'm I don't want to fucking see that. But I might go see the Mario movie there out of morbid curiosity, but yeah, I just want new stuff. Just give me new things. I'm dying for a taste of something.
So I'm going to say a few thoughts on that. First, in regards to the comments about the Best Picture you're referring to, you did say exactly the same thing about Wonder Woman 84, so don't be a hypocrite.
Hey, you know what? That movie, okay, here's my fucking soapbox moment. That movie at least tasted different. It might have been I don't know, oatmeal raisin. It might have been kind of funky. But at least it tasted different.
It tasted different because you weren't used to eating shit. But okay, all right. Well, moving on from that, because I'm just kidding about that, obviously. The problem you describe is real, and I have to go with soapbox, play devil's advocate, what have you. that's our fault. As much as we want to complain,
oh, yeah, it's totally
we
our fault.
Okay, I just want everybody to. Okay, I'm glad you guys both agree. The thing is, we can get upset that the movies you're referring to, those AA movies, we can get upset that they don't exist. But the problem is, the reason they don't exist is because nobody went to see them. They're businesses. The film industry is an industry. It makes money. That's its reason for existence. And if they see, hey, we can put down $40 million on this unknown property that no one's ever heard of, and we're risking the $40 million, or we can put down $100 million on something we absolutely guarantee will make $500 million. That's just the smart bet. You don't really care what the reason, like what franchise it is. It's an investment. That's all it is. The consequence of that is what you're describing. But it's our fault because when we had the opportunity to see more AA movies, we didn't. We went and we saw the things that we said earlier about video games. We went to the junk food ones. We went to the ones that were familiar. I mean, so as much as we all complain about it, it is our fault collectively, but it's not completely dead. You can still support more stuff like that. There are a lot of movies that exist that you don't hear about because they have such low budgets for marketing. I mean, there's all sorts of streaming apps, which is the third element of this, really, or the third thing I was going to say, is that a lot of movies now are made exclusively for streaming platforms, be it Netflix, HBO Max, whatever it is, Disney Plus even, that aren't really intended anymore to get theatrical releases. But then you also have weird things like Tubi that has its own exclusive line of movies and so on and so forth. We're simply in this odd phase where I think they don't really know what the movie theater is supposed to do yet as a concept, but the one thing it definitely makes money doing is still releasing the AAA movies. I just don't know if we exist in a time where it's possible to have AA movies be successful in movie theaters anymore, just because of the distribution deals and all that. There's too many complicated factors. It made more sense in a time where they essentially had the monopoly on distribution. They no longer do. The studios are now able to send their movie directly to the consumer and bypass them. Even in the DVD VHS era, that wasn't seen as profitable enough. But in the streaming era where they have you on subscriptions, they have to provide you some content. That kind of fills that void by making cheaper, low budget movies that they can just bypass having to pay cuts to theaters and having to pay for marketing on as many platforms. So you only put in all that effort if you're expecting your Avatar 2, etc.
So I hear what you're saying, and I agree 100%. But what I will say is, in terms of the profit margins of that movie studios are expecting to get from films, especially theatrical releases now, is, in my opinion, a little bit ridiculous. A couple years ago, when there was I think it was a new Tomb Raider game came out, and this game sold amazing. It was
6 million units, was it?
I think it was like 6 million units, and the publisher, Square Enix, said we're not happy with the sales of this because they expected it to sell over 10 million units. So 6 million units, a very successful game, more than a lot of franchises would get, was not good enough. Now, this is a bad example because it was part of a Member Berries franchise. The last Star Trek movie that came out, the last J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, Star Trek Beyond, came out. That grossed $300 million at the box office. That's $1/3 billion worldwide. That is a not insignificant amount of money, and I guarantee you, especially for that movie, that does not get a lot of advertising. So you can't even say, well, the advertising budget is obviously, or the bonuses, or the distribution rights, yada yada. It's $300 million. People went to go see this fucking thing. A lot of people did, and they paid money to do it. But the demands of the studios, seeing that $1 billion that Avatar or Avengers got, that's the greed. They're like, we're only going to do stuff that can breach that upper echelon of sales. And that's my problem, is with most things, it just comes down to greed.
Well, I have to correct you on that one, because Star Trek Beyond's budget was almost $400 million. So it actually lost money.
I don't know.
I'm looking right at it. The budget is the production budget. I'm just going to teach you something out here. This goes to everybody. The production budget, when it's stated, it is just the budget to make the film itself, which was stated $185 million. You have to double that for the marketing, because that's what they doubled. So it's a little shy of it. So it'd be about $375 million. It grossed worldwide $343 million. So right out of the gate, it already lost money. But that doesn't account for theater percentages. In the United States, American theaters take 25% of the gross. It grossed domestically $158 million. Now shave off 25%, that remainder is how much actually went to Paramount. Then you go to international markets where it changes. In some countries, like such as China, it actually is 75% of the gross remains with the theaters. So as absurd as the number is, to think that a 2-hour picture of a series of lights, colors, and sound could come up with a substantial figure like $343 million generated, the people who made that movie lost their shirt.
And even if they didn't, if it still made less money, if it still made significantly less money than the second one, it's still not going to make them make a fourth one. Even though they've been trying to make a fourth one, but apparently
the fourth one is beyond. No
listen,
pun intended. It's beyond dead.
I hear you that you say double the money for the budget. They did not spend $180 million marketing that movie, and that was a big thing that's a big thing from the director. Said it. They said they didn't fucking spend the money to advertise
that money went somewhere else then, because either way, I mean, look it up. That movie bombed, and I'm just saying, even if you shrank that down to $100 million, whatever. It's still the same thing. It's simple math. Like, that movie in the end lost money. You have to account. People think that just because it grossed that money, that the movie got all that money. It didn't. Theaters take a substantial percentage of that. Now, to be fair, it will generate additional revenue when it hits home theater options, or home release, DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, whatever it is. There's ways to get more bites out of the apple. If there's any sort of, well, this is kind of an older idea, but TV distribution deals, that kind of thing. Any potential theatrical re-releases, though you typically only do that with the films that were already successful to begin with. That movie in particular did not make money. That's the primary reason you have not seen a fourth one.
But that's just one example.
I agree. We're talking about a specific film. Now, I will agree with you, but the other thing, Rob, is that if you have a movie, let's say an Avatar 2, because that's a perfect example, because that's now apparently the world's highest grossing film in history, which is insane, because I don't know anybody who's seen it other than me, and I didn't even like it, but it did gross over $2 billion. While we can think about all the production budget that went into it, the money that comes back into it is ultimately pumped into the studio, where they attempt to use that to have to offset a lot of other losses. Things like, well, granted it's different studios, but things like Star Trek Beyond. There's a reason these companies don't typically fold and go out of business, at least the big ones. And there's a lot of shifty things there where they managed to put the financing. Paramount didn't actually pay for this in a lot of cases. In the case of Star Trek Beyond, there was actually some Chinese firm that paid for a lot of that movie, and there was an entire law in China rewritten because of this movie's failure. So the world of the film industry and how that money is actually generated is very complex, and that's why they need these ridiculous returns, because that movie, again, we go with the basic rule of thumb that if the movie cost $185 million in production, double its budget for advertisement, so around $375, it would have had to have grossed about, I don't have the calculator in front of me, but maybe around $500 million to break even, just because of the amount you have to give up to the theater chain as well. That's why that movie is told, if this thing grosses under $850 million, despite it on paper looking like it only cost $185, that's why it lost money, and that's why it's considered a disappointment. That's why it's called a flop. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. But once again, we're dancing around the fact that AA movies, the movies that so many of us have nostalgia for in this golden age of the 80s and 90s, like, the operating costs were far less, because they used unknown actors. They used unknown properties. They weren't paying for fucking IP rights. They didn't have to fucking market the stuff as much.
Dude, you're preaching to the choir. Like, obviously I would love to see more of that stuff, but as I said, we're the problem. Like the few that come out, people don't really go to see them. What was the last big one that even kind of counted? Do you remember?
What do you mean?
It was Deadpool.
Deadpool, that's
and
an IP.
I know, and that's why it barely counts. But it was the last one where they gave it like a really modest budget, and it exploded into success. I think it was like $40 million budget at the time, which was very reasonable. And that's kind of where they should be aiming. And for a minute there, they were trying, but then they just didn't stick with it. But yeah, I agree with you, dude. You don't have to sell me on the idea that we're oversaturated with IPs. That's obviously exhausting. But at the same time, how many movies on Tubi that are exclusive to the platform have you gone to see?
I don't know.
None, because I don't have Tubi.
I don't have Tubi.
Exactly my point. That's just how it is. Like, that's just the world we live in right now. And I don't know if we're ever going to be able to go back to that era. Yeah. Just because that was like a perfect storm of scenarios. In the 80s, we in the United States anyway, we unlocked the ability to produce content for children that didn't have to be educational. So it freed up some creativity to start producing content like that. And then when you started focusing more on that, you were able to make things like Ninja Turtles, which eventually that audience was us. We got older. You could make a live action Ninja Turtles that was, different and interesting. If we look at this from the perspective of the early 90s when we got the first live action movie, it was still a new, relatively speaking, IP. A lot of that kind of stuff was just kind of a perfect storm scenario. And it was also before we really understood, outside of the blockbusters like the original Star Wars trilogy, before we really understood the ability to just constantly resurrect franchises. I mean, you and I, Rob, we were born in a time where sequels were not necessarily rare, but franchises weren't crafted. They were just kind of an accident. It's like, oh, that first one did well, do another. And if it did well, do another, until it inevitably stopped. It was nowadays, franchises are kind of premeditated. Like, go back to the Harry Potter movies, which is over 20 years old. They knew from the onset they were doing that whole thing, unless it was an outright flop. We just live in a different era now.
Yeah. Oh. The thing that I would say is that every once in a while there are success stories which make me feel hopeful. So one of the movies that I mentioned that came out last year that really blew a lot of people's minds is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Michelle Yeoh movie. Did you guys see that, by the way?
I did not.
I haven't.
I'm part of the problem. I told you.
Watch it. It's that, and that is from a mid-sized studio. I think it's from A24. And its budget was $14 million. And they distributed it in theaters and on streaming. And the global sales were, I think, over $100 million on a $14 million budget. And this has some big actors in it. Michelle Yeoh's in it, and she's very, very, well-known actress. There was another movie that really, it kind of broke my heart. Knives Out, which was ironically Rian Johnson. That movie, it's a cool, whodunit murder mystery movie, came out in theaters. It did well, the first one. And they're like, Studio greenlit a sequel. And I'm like, great. That's the start of, as Adam said, kind of a perfect storm. You lucked into new franchises, and then you got sequels to build a new IP, to build a new franchise. That movie was out, the second one, I think it's called Glass Onion, was out in theaters for, I think, 2 weeks. And then they pulled it from theaters and put it on Netflix, because Netflix bought the rights to distribute them now. So you will never see another one of those movies in a theater. It'll only be on Netflix. So,
like I said, that's Adam's a new element.
The streaming companies are throwing ridiculous money at even great auteurs like fucking Martin Scorsese. His last movie was a Netflix exclusive. So, that is the dystopian reality where it is controlled by the streaming companies, and movie theaters are dying unless you want to go see some shitty CGI Marvel movie.
Yeah, of course, now some of the streaming services are starting to lose money / realize that, all this investment we put into it isn't working. Uh-oh.
Look at Batgirl. The movie's fucking finished, and it was a tax write-off. They'll never fucking release that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Paramount Plus is apparently running into financial trouble, so they're canceling Star Trek Discovery after the 5th season. Which, as someone who likes that show, honestly, they should have ended it in the 3rd season. Not because season 4 is bad; it's just because they took the obvious moment that should have been the end of the series and put it at the end of season 3 for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's and at the same time they buy Showtime Plus and they're merging that. So it's like it's just about shifting the money around and like seeing what sticks. Let's grow the library. Let's grow the rights, catalog.
Yeah.
I agree, but I think we should wrap up here. So I just want to address one other thing that I'm really sick of seeing, although ironically I never actually see them. I was for a while, and I just gave up. Those terrible, terrible, terrible Disney live-action remakes of the animated classics.
You
saw those? I saw a couple.
Fuck, Adam, you're part of the problem.
No. I want you to understand. I saw them on planes. Like, I didn't watch them in theaters. Jesus Christ. I saw just a couple of them. I think I saw the Beauty and the Beast one. It was terrible. I think the last one I watched was the Aladdin one, the terrible Will Smith one. And I'm always like, these are the worst things that have ever been made. I don't know why anybody would want to see this. I don't know why this exists. At least that's my instinct. Until the analytical part of me is like, I know exactly why this was made. And I know exactly why people want to go see it. But what a terrible product. And yeah, I want those to stop. This is the eternal conundrum. The reason you can make a Lion King remake is because everybody remembers the success of how great The Lion King was. Thus, you have a built-in installed fan base and marketing just surrounded by social buzz alone, which is the dream. That's what they want. It's a safe investment. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really matter how good or how much effort they even necessarily put into the film. It will always be lesser because it has to live up to something that was already acclaimed as a legendary film, which is essentially a Herculean, impossible task. And that's what they go into it doing. Then you change certain things for sensibilities and whatever, which is always
for Chinese markets.
Yeah, or whatever it is, you change things that just annoy people or because they annoyed people or whatever the case is. And so you never win that because you either changed it and that made people upset that you changed it, or you didn't change it and that upsets people because it's exactly the same thing. Why did you even make it? This is the eternal conundrum they always have. The irony is, if you were to, say, remake a movie where they had a good idea but executed it poorly, say like The Black Cauldron, a Disney movie that nobody really remembers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You could probably make a pretty good live-action remake where you'd have way more creative freedom out of it. You might actually be able to make something good. But what happens in that process? You don't have the marketing into it anymore. Hence, it no longer serves that purpose, breaking the whole thing.
Another problem with remaking The Black Cauldron is I think there are still book rights involved with that.
Well, I was just pointing out that they have a fine. Oliver and Company. It doesn't matter. Whatever Disney animated flops that existed, Oliver and Company, Black Cauldron, whatever it is, the ones that people don't remember as
Rescuers, yeah. But you know what? On Disney Plus there is a Willow TV show right now, and that movie sucked. Nobody has any nostalgia for that, so I don't know how well it's doing.
I've heard that Disney Plus show is really bad, but I don't know. I have no dog in that fight.
So it's living up to the source material.
Sure. All I'm trying to say is this is the era we live in. It's the temptation to go and support the things that give you nostalgia berries is very understandable. We all get it because we all obviously can talk endlessly about Marvel while none of us even has a subscription to something like Tubi, so we can't see the indie films and stuff they're making over there. But the sad economic reality of the world we live in is if you want new creative IPs, you have to actually support the few that get out there. Otherwise, this doesn't end. It only gets worse and worse and worse. And that's where the buckling point comes in, where maybe movies stop going to theaters. I mean, maybe we're at the buckling point. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is, as you said, the only thing you can see in theaters now is really the tentpole remake garbage that we have, and anything that's creative or interesting can only exist on streaming platforms. I don't know. Maybe that's it. Maybe we're already there.
Probably. I mean,
so everybody's homework: go watch Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. It's awesome. I think it's on HBO.
Well,
oh yeah, same place.
Well, then I'm not watching it.
HBO Max, the home of Wonder Woman 84, so you can watch both. Have a nice double feature, right, Rob?
Yes. Oh, a double feature? That's good old days.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining me. Joseph, always, of course, thank you for being here. And Spencer, thank you very much for that subject before, as well as shout-outs to Chuck Shaw. Abdullah, again, we hope you're all right. As shout-outs to Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Tim Inman, Trey Wagner, and Rob, thanks, as always, for being here.
Always a pleasure.
All right, well, thank you guys very much for listening, and we'll see you all later.